Hello Koma Tribers, welcome to Koma Club NG YouTube channel. It's Black History Month and we decided to talk about prominent Black figures in history. Today, we're talking about Malcolm X. In 1957, Hinton Johnson, a member of the Nation of Islam, was attacked by two policemen in New York City and beaten near to death. Malcolm X, an assistant leader at the Nation of Islam, heard about the story and decided to go help him out at the police station. So he went with just a small group of people. The police initially denied having any Muslims in their custody, but when the group outside increased to about 500 people, the police had to cough up Hinton Johnson and his near-dead body. Gory. Hinton Johnson was taken to the hospital, and when Malcolm X returned with him, the crowd outside had increased to about 4,000 people. Crazy. The policemen were near terrified, but they still refused to release Hinton Johnson on bail. Malcolm X, realizing there was nothing else he could do, walked out to address the crowd. He didn't say a word, just a single hand signal, and the crowd dispersed within minutes. That's the kind of power Malcolm X had. Malcolm X was born Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska on the 19th of May 1925 to two small-time civil rights activists, Earl Little and Louise Little. Earl was the We're going to start this part. I couldn't cram this thing, so okay. Earl was a local leader at the Universal Negro Improvement Association. You put that on the screen, right? Okay, let me start again. While his mother was the secretary who sent news to the Negro World Association. Okay, go. His father, Earl, was a local leader at the Universal Negro Improvement Association, while his mother was a secretary and sent newsletters out to the Negro world. Malcolm X and his 5 siblings were raised on values of strong Black pride and self-sufficiency. Malcolm's family moved around a lot when he was younger, and this was because of the constant threats that Malcolm's family was getting from the Ku Klux Klan and the Black Legion, a white supremacist organization at the time. Malcolm's dad died years later in a car accident, although it has been reported that it was a sabotage by the Black Legion. In 1941, Malcolm X dropped out of high school because his white teacher said he couldn't practice law. In his words, the words of the white teacher, it was no realistic goal for a nigger. So Malcolm X went on into a life of small crimes, racketeering, and eventually landed himself in jail 5 years later, in 1946. Malcolm X, speaking about his time in prison, said he had never been truly free as he was in prison. He began to take up reading and expanding his knowledge greatly. Prison was where Malcolm was first introduced to the Nation of Islam. So what happened was one of his brothers called him up and was like, "Yo, Malcolm, I gotta tell you about these new guys." It was the Nation of Islam. So they were an Islamic organization focused on the freedom and emancipation of Black people all over the United States. And so Malcolm was told to stay away from pork and smoking cigarettes, and somehow they could get him out of jail. Malcolm picked up reading about Islam, and before you know it, he had begun correspondence with the then leader of the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad. Before this, Malcolm used to be called Satan in prison because of his adversity to religion of any kind. However, Malcolm started subscribing to the preachings of the Nation of Islam, and in no time, he was released on parole from prison. One of the Nation of Islam's teaching was released from oppression of white ancestors. And so Malcolm X dropped his little surname for X to signify what his surname would have been if he was in Africa or from Africa. He was not the only one who did it. Many Nation of Islam members would drop their surnames, including his wife Betty, for the X surname. That brings us to the Hinton Johnson incident. This was the first time that Malcolm X became widely acclaimed all over the United States. Everybody knew him. Everybody was asking, who's this Black guy with so much power that could disperse 4,000 people without a word. That was Malcolm X. Malcolm continued as a leader at the Nation of Islam and continued to push for Black empowerment, Black supremacy, and in fact criticized other leaders of the mainstream leaders of the civil rights movement, like Martin Luther King, for their push for non-violence and racial integration. In the 1960s, Malcolm became disillusioned with the teachings of the Nation of Islam, perhaps due to his travels around Europe to Africa, and so in 1964 he finally left the nation. There were reports by Malcolm of death threats coming from the Nation of Islam when he eventually left. And so on February 21st, 1965, while Malcolm addressed a crowd of Black men in New York City, he was assassinated. Yes, he was assassinated by 3 shooters from the Nation of Islam, and he had 21 gunshot wounds to his body. And so that was the end of the great Malcolm X, the great and powerful Malcolm X. To celebrate Black History Month, we have other videos lined up about prominent Black individuals. So stay tuned for that. Remember to subscribe. Click that bell beside so you'll be notified whenever we have a new video. Like, comment, and share to your friends. If you loved this, follow us on our social media, Koma Club NG. See you in the other video.